as we've done a lot of these transformation programs across several industries across the globe, what we have seen is there are some critical success factors that actually contribute to some of these programs being really successful. One of the critical success factors is, I think Chakri talked about it this morning, is the ability to do continuous improvement, right? So I think the Pandora team talked about it, where you want to take an MVP approach. You cannot get everything in the very get-go. So what you want to be able to do is what we're calling this fast innovation, where you get the basic system into place, you kind of start to use it, get the lessons learned, and then the Innovation CoE, which the clients can build themselves in-house with internal skill set, is the one that is then constantly kind of innovating and improving as you kind of go along, right? So that's the mindset that we want to take, and that's what has been, that's what we've seen kind of work in a lot of our transformations. And it's got two components. One is the Innovation CoE itself, the organization. And what we're going to also show you is some of the self-service tools that we have built to make this very, very easy to kind of self-deploy without having to be very technical. And with AI, a lot of these tools are becoming more and more non-IT business kind of friendly. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about for the next 20, 30 minutes. Looking at the journey of deployments, right? So in the past, what used to happen is the systems were pretty rigid, right? So what people had to do, I think Pandora also talked about it, is they would put all the requirements right in the very get-go, right? So you would have a very, very complex system because it is very hard to make any changes later on. So they're trying to get all the requirements in the very first release. When the system goes into production, it becomes very complex and it becomes very expensive to make any changes, right? So the run and maintain is usually done by a lot of consultants that are needed. People don't want to touch the system because we don't know what could potentially break. And then a lot of these offline tools and processes start to spawn off, Excel and so on. And then the system's value starts to degrade because everything is kind of happening offline. So all the decision making again becomes siloed and not efficient and optimal, right? That's kind of the journey of the past. And the way we want to look at the deployment is kind of in two phases. The left side of what you see on the screen is the base deployment, right? The MVP is what they called it, the minimum viable platform, if you will, where using the 80-20 rule, you do not need to get all your requirements in the get-go. You start with what is the high-value requirements, maybe the 20% requirements, get the quick value. And that is done by the O9 delivery teams because they know the system, so they kind of set it up. But then what you see on the right side of the screen is the continuous improvement, right? This is where your customer CoE themselves can do all the subsequent changes, and we're going to show you some of the tools that are available. So then the customer becomes the master of their own destiny, if you will, right? They're able to, without having to bring in a lot of expensive consultants, they're able to go ahead and do all the future configuration kind of themselves. So that's kind of how we see the world. The initial deployment kind of set up by the O9 teams, and then all the subsequent improvements are done by the customer CoE themselves using the tools that we'll show you in a bit. So then, what are some of the self-service capabilities? The first thing we should think about is all the change management, the training, the user adoption of the current system, making sure that you deploy this kind of globally. If you started in one region, how do you paste that into other regions for other product lines? Then any extensions, right? As you put this in production, you're going to learn a lot. What are some additional features you need to put back into the platform? So all those extensions. And then I think we talked about using the reference products as the starting point. But then every company is going to have their own secret sauce, their own proprietary processes. So they can be then introduced into the system as well. Your SMEs can, without having to go do a lot of coding, can incorporate your internal proprietary processes into the platform as well. Then in a lot of companies, what we also see is there is a lot of legacy tools, dashboarding tools, data management tools that sit around the planning, legacy tools. Slowly, they can all be modernized and built into the platform as well. So you're kind of sunsetting, extra infrastructure, and everything kind of slowly comes into the platform. All the silos kind of drop off. So these are all some of the capabilities that the COE teams can self-service and kind of slowly extend on their own. So then we get asked questions about, how do you set up a COE? I think Pandora is already starting to set one up. They talked about. So the way we see this on the top is the O9, after they do the first deployment, they kind of slowly wean off from the programs, and they train the customer COEs, and they start to ramp up. And they do the ongoing configuration, the change management, training, value tracking, et cetera, et cetera. And the way we want to set up these COEs is some business-oriented functions and also some technical IT-oriented functions, some communication functions. So I'll start with this business function over here. We call these product managers or internal coaches, and we want to have one per product area, right? One for demand planning, one for supply planning. So these are your demand planning product managers, supply planning product managers, usually brought over from business, not IT people. And their main job is to represent the different regions. As you're doing these global programs, they talk to the different regions and they bring the requirements from the different regions. They're also training all the people, coaching all the people, making sure the value tracking is happening, the user adoption is happening. So that's a very, very critical role, and a lot of our programs succeed based on the people that are staffed in that function, the product manager function. So this is a pretty important role to be in the COE. Then the next function is a little bit more of a technical function, right, where this is a centralized function where they're setting up the prototyping, right? So the next process is already prototyped. All the extensions to the current process, they're kind of configuring it. All the new data that needs to be integrated into the platforms, so they're doing some data extensions, technical function, IT, data science, et cetera, et cetera. Then finally, there is also a very important communication function, right? All the outputs that are coming out of the planning process, all the policy changes, et cetera, they need to be communicated throughout the organization. All the change has to be kind of affected, executed, measured, et cetera. And then there is a PMO office, the program management office, that kind of sits on top. And what we have done now, as we have put these COAs in place, is Umesh is going to show a lot of tools that we have developed for self-service in all of these areas, in the business, IT, and the communication. All of that are now AI-enabled, where we have AI chatbots that are doing all the functional training, change management, value tracking for the business people. Then all the extensions to the model itself can be done without a lot of coding. In the past, there was a lot of coding and things involved in this function. Now it's all very English-driven. You can change the configuration, extend the configuration, create new reports, dashboards, all through English-driven, less IT skills needed in this function. Then, of course, all the communication, all the podcast, automated generation of PowerPoints, all the emails that are going out, all of that is generated by Gen AI agents as well. So what we're going to show you is some examples of agents in all the different categories: business category, IT category, and also the communication marketing category.
All right, thanks, Anand. I think a lot of you are familiar with the platform already, but I think what we wanted to set up was capabilities the COE needs, but how do we make it easy for them to understand what the platform does, what are the capabilities, why is it even a platform, right? It is intended to be extensible, right? We have a package solution, but there is flexibility in the platform to configure it yourself, right? So the self-service configuration is really what we want to highlight in this session, because there's a lot of capabilities already out there, right? The platform itself today, I could go into designer mode, right? There is what we call a platform designer, which gives me flexibility to do everything that you see on our platform is actually configured through the designer, right? Whether O9 does it or partner does it or you guys do it, it's all available, it's accessible for controls, right? So I can design new reports, I can create new data models, I can extend the models, I can actually create new graphs, new rules, folders, etc., right? So everything that is available that you guys use today in the tools is actually available as part of self-service configuration. If I'm in an IBP screen, for example, and I wanted to reconfigure the layout of this, right? We've exposed that to sort of the configurator users in some sense. So I could go and say, okay, I have this dashboard. What if I wanted to change the dashboard? So there is a layout designer mode that you can go into. where it now enables you to actually make changes to the layout itself, right? You can add new, you can extend the layouts. In this case, I'm going to say I'm going to add a new view. You can give it a title, my aim 10x. And what it does is it gives you an empty view. In this case, let me just reconfigure it a little bit to add more. So I just selected a single block, but you could say I want a 2x2 dashboard view. And then it should be able to now give you 4 frames. You can come in here, any of the reports that you have configured, right? You can just drag and drop them into the view. So think of it as a simple self-service configurator that you can do yourself, right? So if your team decides, your business user decides, I don't like the layout that came with the standard product, I want to quickly reconfigure it, you can do it yourself, right? So it's as simple as visual drag and drop and elements that are enabled. You've seen the AI framework that we've been showing, but there's a collection of tools that, so if you think about the AI, what does it have, right? It has agents that we've been talking about, but the agents are using certain tools in the background. The tools are really what we publish as part of the platform. The tools can include different things where it has access to the platform capabilities, right? So if you look at things like create a measure or upload dimension data, upload fact data, extend the dimension models and so on, create new attributes, all of them are what you call tools that we publish as part of O9. So then if you want to manage scenarios, create new scenarios, so there's data elements to it, and there's metadata elements to it. Metadata meaning create a new model, extend the model, add new attributes. So those are elements that work on the self-service platform itself, and then you should be able to invoke some of these and extend the models, right? So what we're doing as part of it, again, it's various elements of the platform that we're starting to enable through self-service. So I'll just show you maybe a couple of demos, use case around, for example, I have a forecasting model today, right? I have a short-term forecasting model. I'm doing more strategic planning now. I'd like to extend the model to do a long-term forecast. Typically, that requires a lot of downtime, right? For the systems, for the people, transformation to happen, how do I even set up a new model, etc. It requires a lot of touches. What if we could do it much easier today if I were to be able to extend that model? Today, if you're familiar with O9, there is a deployment that happens where you can have multiple models deployed on the EKG, right? I could have a demand planning, supply planning, commercial planning, short-term demand planning, etc. So you could have different models with different grains. Our control panel actually shows you what has been deployed, right? What's the status of the deployments and so on. With that, you can actually get visual representation of deployments, what models it's using, what is the reference models being used, so some audit of the models as well, right? And then you'd want to understand under them, what is the forecast models deployed. So in this case, I want to navigate into the demand planning model to see what are the current models being deployed. There's a standard stat forecast model that's enabled. It's a short-term stat model that's a 18, 24-month kind of model, right? So in this model, if I were to take, this is my demand EKG, what if I wanted to extend this model itself, right? I can go to our agent chat. Let me just switch to my AI. And here, I'm going to ask the question of, show me the solutions installed. So it is aware of the same thing. What I was showing in the UI, it's also aware of the same information. So in this case, it should be able to list out all the models that I currently have, right? So what you're seeing in the visual representation on the UI, it should be able to present the same information. What are the various models? What are the tenants? And things like that, right? So then if I wanted to extend the demand planning, first let me understand what is the demand planning model, right? In this case, what I'm going to do is ask what are the currently modeled DP, which was the short-term model that we had. So then I can show you how to extend it and then come back here to see what the new model itself is, right? So while it's pulling it up, this is exactly what we saw on the report as well. There's a stat forecasting model. It's being done at an L1 level, and then it has some information about the model itself, and so on. So with this, if I were to extend this model, let me just pull up this guy. So I'm going to add a stat forecasting long-term model. What it's going to do is it's going to use the command, I'm going to use extend the current decision model for stat forecasting long-term, right? That's really what I want to do here. So in this case, what it's going to do is take the existing short-term model, replicate it for long-term, and then give you the access to adjust the time frame that you'd like the model to run at. I'm just going to let it run for now, where it's going to go through the configuration process per se to look at extending the data model, to adding the new models, and it'll keep trying, okay? So it did finish extension, so it did add some new measures. So think of the work that this would have taken you, right? You would have taken time to figure out what are the new measures I need to add, how am I going to configure those measures, how do I set up the new models? There's a bunch of steps that you would have to go through, whereas now here it's actually, it understands all the steps that you would have to typically take, right? And it's able to do that for you. So I'm just going to go back and let me just pull up the same question down the prompt, so then it can see what's the new updates. So now it should be able to, if I ask the same question on the DP models, you should be able to see the updated models, right? We had the short-term models, but now you'll also see the long-term forecast model, right? That got created as well, right? So it's as simple as that. In some sense, it's able to replicate some of these models very quickly because it understands the EKG. It's almost like you are having to avoid having to do an implementation process here, right? It's able to do that for you. Let me just look at the details of the model as well, right? What are the rules and the parameters being used in these models, in which case I can say, because I have multiple algorithms being deployed, I want to go and configure what would be the algorithms and the CML or the custom ML kind of algorithms that I want to use for different types of forecasting models, right? So this is just listing the currently enabled models for short-term, mid-term, long-term iterations, and so on, right? And some more details around that. What now I can do is take this information and say, okay, I'd like to go set up my new model, right? So I can go into setup for the forecasting models, where it's going to show me for the long-term forecasting model, what are the currently enabled functions. So in my new long-term stat iteration, right, so I can now configure what is my CML functions, right? What is my objectives for the custom MLs, what algorithms I want to use, what are the various system suggested stat segment setup, what rules do I want to use. I can enable that. I can now also say stat iteration is going to be a 60-month long horizon. So I'm also setting the horizon, right? So it's as simple as that. I mean, this was just a simple example of how we can extend. But what I was showing you is more self-service, right? It's having to do, if the COE is familiar with what the platform does, how to configure the platform, some of these are now becoming agent-enabled, right? And that's where the power of simplifying, improving the productivity, improving the learning curve of how you go about implementing some of these solutions becomes much easier. With that, I'm going to end the session. I know there's some more examples. If you want, we can walk you guys through it. But for the sake of time, I'm going to end at 0, 0.